Hi, welcome to Person-Centered Recovery Planning, a review of plan components. This is Vignette 2, Jaslyn. In this segment, we'll consider the experiences of Jaslyn and consider what elements of her recovery plan might look like. For a quick review, simply watch and consider the content that I'll present. For a more in-depth opportunity to practice your knowledge and skills, you can use the vignette and prompts to imagine that you're working with Jaslyn and create a recovery plan that's abbreviated to build out the components as you watch the video. And I'll invite you to hit pause along the way to develop the components as you review the information presented on Jaslyn's life. I'll let you know when it might be a good time to hit the pause button. If you choose not to, you'll still have opportunities to jot down notes or select the best plan component from a multiple choice list of options. You can download a worksheet to use, or a blank sheet of paper is also just fine. So here are the steps we'll be taking. This is very similar to Vignette 1 if you've looked at that video. We'll demonstrate how the sections of a plan, the document of a recovery plan, can reflect what we know and find meaningful about a person's identity and their plans for recovery. We're going to start by learning about Jaslyn, including her vision of the life that she wants, her priorities for recovery, what's going well, and what she's encountering as barriers. After we highlight what we've learned about her strengths and barriers, we'll consider what kind of goal statement we'd expect to find on her recovery plan. And that will capture what's listed here as planning steps 1 and 2. And that will give us an idea about where Jaslyn is starting from. Next, we'll move on to thinking about how we expect her life to improve as those immediate barriers are no longer getting in her way. We'll do this by identifying how one objective might read on her plan. And that's step 3, what we expect to see as results. Then finally, in step 4, we'll think about different kinds of immediate actions Jaslyn might take to produce those desired results within the professional mental health system and outside of the system. Okay, so at the end of this short video, we will put together a snapshot of the Person-Centered Recovery Plan, or PCRP, core components that show how different types of information fit together in a simple, practical way that both highlight the person's plan for meaningful change and meets regulatory standards for things like medical necessity and billing. We're not going to end up with a complete sample recovery plan, but we will view a complete set of core components based on the story or vignette that we'll begin with. So let's get started. Okay, let's review this short story or information about what we know about Jaslyn's life. So Jaslyn is a soft-spoken, intelligent 58-year-old woman who's a fierce Scrabble player, generous with friends, and is known for doing extra chores around the group home, especially when welcoming a new housemate. However, Jaslyn experienced a significant decline in functioning weeks after a new male resident moved into the home, who she told her roommate, quote, reminded her of an uncle she had problems with as a kid. Jaslyn went from being a quiet leader among the group, often organizing community outings, to rarely leaving her bedroom, staying up most of the night, and frequently making comments about concerns for the safety of herself and other female residents. Her self-care has declined, for example, weight loss from eating less, going 5 or more days without bathing, and her bedroom isn't clean. Although she's now focused on just regaining a sense of safety and returning to, quote, a normal day-to-day routine, she used to talk a lot about getting her own place where she could have a rose garden like her grandmother did when she was a kid. She has enjoyed working with a peer specialist, Jack, in the past, and sometimes asks that her roommate, Nancy, accompany her to planning meetings for support. She's diagnosed with schizophrenia, paranoid type. She has reported a history of childhood abuse that she's not elaborated on or received treatment for. So, based on this information, let's first look at what stands out about Jaslyn's strengths. So, feel free to pause the video and take a little bit more time to review the short vignette and jot down using your worksheet or just a blank sheet of paper how you might describe Jaslyn's strengths on her recovery plan. And you might do this collaboratively with Jaslyn if we had her here working with us. If you choose not to pause the video, we're going to move on now by identifying some of those strengths. I think just in this short little paragraph that we have, we see quite a few strengths still available to Jaslyn or that were recently standing out and that are well known to Jaslyn's friends and network of supporters, right? She's intelligent, she's got friends, she's known as a quiet leader among the community. We know that she's known for doing extra chores to welcome people. So she's kind of got that awareness of community building. We know that she engages in playing Scrabble, so she's got some hobbies. She takes initiative to plan outings for people. And then she's got that support with the roommate. We know that recently, when she encountered some issues, she reached out to the roommate. I think that that's a real asset. So let's reset our view of the vignette. And now we're going to take a closer look at what she's encountering as barriers. And I'll invite you to look a little bit more closely at this same information and think about how we might describe this in collaboration with Jaslyn on the recovery plan. And remember, this is really going to serve as the priority focus for services and supports. Feel free to pause the video to take care of that and have a little bit more time with the information. Otherwise, we're going to move on to naming some of those. So I think we have a few things to unpack here. She specifically says that right now she's focused on regaining a sense of safety. And I think that that's really important because it's articulated as a priority. It also says that she wants to return to a normal day-to-day routine. I think that that really stands out to me. I also see some other things here. So we see that there was a significant decline in her functioning right after this new resident moved in. So I'd want to find out more about that. And certainly, we've got some information about the fact that the new resident reminded her of the uncle that she had problems with. And we also know that there was some abuse in her past that she's not yet chosen to address in treatment. And we know that that's a big decision. And oftentimes people choose not to address childhood trauma until they're in a time of stability, right? And safety. So I would be wondering, does she have education about trauma, right? There's a lot more information that I'd want to get here. But we've got something that we would want to go ahead and jot down on the plan, I think. We also have this really concrete information that I'd want to put down that would really help communicate medical necessity. So it states that she's rarely leaving her bedroom, she's not sleeping, she's lost weight. Sounds like she's not caring for herself or her environment in the way that she typically was. So there's been a significant drop in her routine and in her self care. So far, we've taken a look at who Jaslyn is right now, what her life looks like, including what assets or strengths that she has, but also what she's really facing in terms of barriers or those deficits in functioning. Now let's think about what kind of goal statement, what's sort of her driving vision for recovery. Remember that in person centered planning, goals aren't always practical or things that we're going to measure. It's an opportunity for people to dream big. So feel free to take a little bit more time with that original information and consider what Jaslyn is really moving toward in her life that serves as motivation for recovery. And you can pause the video now. Otherwise, we're going to look at some sample goal statements. So let's take a look at these three options and consider which of these might be the best fit for Jaslyn. So we have option A, Jaslyn will address trauma-related issues. B, quote, I want to be able to return to my normal day-to-day routine. C, I see myself in my own place with a rose garden like the one my grandma used to have. Feel free to pause and consider this a little more. We've got some quality indicators over to the right as reminders for what PCRP goal statements are really aiming for. Or if you're ready to move on, here we go. We're going to name the best option. So from this list, C is what we know from this short vignette that she really wants in her life. It's something that's motivating. And while she might be less focused on it right now because she's in a time of distress from acute symptoms, it's no less important to show that we believe that she can get there. The other things might show up on her plan, but I think we might see the addressing trauma as something as the result of further conversation, and returning to the day-to-day routine is a more immediate outcome that we'll measure. And so that will fall in a different plan component. Okay, so coming back to our overview of our 5 core components, we're oriented to what kind of life Jaslyn hopes to have, what's going well, and what is standing in her way. So our next step here, let's consider a sample objective together. So feel free to pause and develop a sample SMART objective on your own based on the information that we have, taking an immediate barrier and imagining what her life might look like in the near future once that barrier is overcome. Otherwise, we're going to look at some options. So let's look at these 3 options for Jaslyn. A, Jaslyn will be able to sleep for a minimum of 6 hours a night for an entire week as the result of feeling safer within the next 30 days. B, Jaslyn will meet with a therapist about her trauma weekly for 90 days. C, Jaslyn will be able to reestablish her daily routine in the next 30 days. So let's think about which of these best meets those quality indicators over in the right-hand column. You can pause to read over these again and think about which one best meets the criteria. Otherwise, we're going to name the best option here. So let's review. A is really measuring her ability to sleep for an entire week. And it implies that if she's able to sleep, it means that she's feeling safer. So it connects functional behavior to this mental health issue. And it also includes a major concern for Jaslyn that she's staying up all night and she's not feeling safe. It does meet the SMART criteria. And so A is our strongest option. Let's take a look at the other two and why we ruled those out. B is really more of an action step. And so we may decide with Jaslyn that she wants to meet with her therapist about trauma, but that would not be an expected result or an objective, right? It's not an outcome, it's an action step. So that would be in a different part of the plan. C is about reestablishing a daily routine, which is a really nice outcome. It's something that she's talked about in that vignette, but it really lacks the specificity to be measurable. And so part of that SMART criteria that we all talk about so often is that we really need to know when the person has met that outcome. And so it needs to be specific. Okay, so far we have developed examples of all of the components except for action steps. So let's take a look there. In a person-centered recovery plan, we don't just have professional services. One of the things that makes PCRP really different is it also includes action steps by the person and by natural supporters. And so for this abbreviated practice plan, we're going to take the time to develop one sample action step for each type. So one professional service, one natural supporter action, and one personal action step. You can take a look at some of the reminders here about the non-billable, non-professional action steps that show up on the plan. If you'd like to pause the video and develop some samples based on the information that we have so far, feel free to do that. Otherwise, we're going to look at some options for each of these three types of action steps. Action steps are also called a variety of things. Your agency or program might refer to them as interventions or strategies, but these are really the immediate things that people can do in order to achieve those expected results. Okay, so we're going to move on now and look at some examples. So let's start by a personal action step, which here is being referred to as a personal wellness strategy by Jaslyn. So let's take a look at these three options. A, resume planning outings for the residents every day. B, begin weekly childhood trauma survivor groups. C, play Scrabble with her roommate or engage in one other activity to occupy her mind for 15 minutes daily. So you can pause and take a look at this more closely. Otherwise, we're going to pick the best one. Of these, C seems to be the best fit because we know it's something that she can likely start doing immediately, and it's outside of formal services. Okay, let's take a look at some options for natural supporter actions. A, Nancy, Jaslyn's roommate, agrees to lock the bedroom door every night for safety. B, Jack, peer specialist, has agreed to go with Jaslyn to the store so she feels safe to leave the home. C, Allison Smith, LPC, will provide education to Jaslyn about the effects of trauma. Feel free to take a little bit more time, or if you're ready, let's see how these options hold up against the quality standards that we've set for natural supporter actions. A is definitely the best option because B and C are professional action steps, are billable services. And we know that natural supporter actions are things that can be done outside of the formal system. So the roommate, who we know is already a supporter, doing something really concrete, like agreeing to remember to lock the door, seems very reasonable. Okay, finally, let's look at some options for professional services based on what we know. A, Jaslyn will be compliant with social skills groups. B, Jack Kaufman, peer specialist, will offer individual support twice weekly for 60 days to identify wellness strategies, discuss treatment preferences, and other needs. C, medication management for 90 days. Okay, let's proceed with choosing the best option. B is definitely the strongest. Given what we know about Jaslyn, we know she's chosen this service in the past, and it's written to include the who, what, when, and why. Looking at options A and C, we can reject those because we know that professional services are always written from the perspective of who's going to provide the service, typically including their professional role and credentials, because it serves as the contract of sorts, showing who's going to be doing what to support the person, as well as meeting regulatory requirements for quality and billing purposes. I'll also note here, because it's a professional peer support service, that other needs in there really provides the opportunity for peer support to be very flexible, because peer support is always self-directed and voluntary for people. But at the same time, you see that it's individualized to the person. Okay, so we've reached the end here. We have a completed abbreviated plan with the 5 PCRP core components representing Jaslyn's recovery support needs based on the information available, and imagining, right, if Jaslyn were here with us making choices about how to represent her needs, and if she had a copy of the plan, we've prioritized human experience language over clinical jargon. We've also included practical information that might serve as a guide to other providers. Now, just as a reminder, a full service plan, which is what PCRP, what it is a person-centered service plan, is going to typically also include a couple more objectives, which are treatment outcomes, typically some type of narrative section where you can explain if other needs are being deferred to a later time, the person's involvement in the planning process, demographics, diagnoses, maybe a crisis plan or advanced directive section. But here we really wanted to amplify the skills needed to adapt the intuitive, practical information that we are gathering from people through organic conversation and categorizing that information into these core components. If you found this clip useful, you can check out the other PCRP vignettes available on the website. Thanks for the work that you do.